Okay, so life is never simple that you are always dealing with a football game or one fisheries at one location or one piece of shared agricultural water body and so on and so forth. You always have larger context for the goods that are being exploited or harvested and need sustainable principles. So let's look at the nested enterprises for dealing with these when the systems are larger. It may be necessary to have systems of governance at different levels. What might be needed is a polycentric many centers of governance and authority as a system, polycentric system, which means there are multi-level governance principles needed as well. Every neighborhood may need to have a policeman to patrol the streets, but not each neighborhood needs to have a crime club. One crime club for the whole city might be better solution to maybe a better solution in terms of having the specific expertise available at a reasonable cost. So there's always a cost impact as well, because if you have a crime club and you need experts, then the cost keeps adding up if you want one at each neighborhood level. Polycentric systems emphasize approaching problems at the right level and ensuring that all parties with some control over outcomes or centers of powers are involved in the process of governance. This may mean that some collective action problems are addressed locally, while others are addressed at a regional or national level. For example, in resolving disputes on the use of water from the Colorado River, it's not productive to have Los Angeles and Phoenix debate this topic alone. Several states and the Bureau of Reclamation need to be involved in order to develop a meaningful plan for allocating the available water. In fact, it's even a transboundary problem, but usually it's conflicts within the US itself that are being dealt with. So, oops, why did that happen? I don't understand. Okay. That's a strange thing. In a polycentric system, some units are general purpose governments, while others may be highly specialized. Self-organized resource governance systems in such a system may be special districts, private associations, or parts of a local government. These highly specialized governance units are nested in several levels of general purpose governments that provide civil, equity, as well as criminal courts. Okay, so there is a legal system which is within the general purpose government's authority, and then there are private clubs, for example, which may be maintaining resources, which may have, sorry about that, I have a frog in my throat, which may have conflict resolution mechanisms without going to courts, but if cases get serious enough, then they have to come out of their club level to go to courts. A university is often organized as a polycentric system, as we mentioned before. Each department has a certain level of autonomy in offering courses. New courses can be offered, but to get them permanently on the books and count for college-wide credits, they have to be approved at the college level. Some basic requirements hold for all the majors, while the rest of the coursework can be tailored to the specifics of the major. So if you're an academic like myself, you know the details in terms of whether your course is seen as a core requirement for another department and how your department gets credit for it, and so on, are all detailed organizational rules and regulations. Besides departments, there are specialized organizations and services such as fraternities and sororities, research institutes, financial aid offices, and libraries. Although there is a university president who oversees the whole university, most units have a lot of flexibility within the general constraints set by the higher levels of authority. So most of the departments, most of the faculty will never even meet the university president, who is up there somewhere doing fundraising or sports stadiums and so on and so forth, and signing off on paperwork of tenure and promotions and so on. If there is a lack of autonomy such that each decision at the local level requires approval from above, a large organization will grind nearly to a halt because of the transaction costs associated with decision making, and many decisions will be made by higher levels officials without proper knowledge of the detailed practical problems associated with the decision, let's say at the department level. So the department has a certain number of faculty, they have certain expertise, and they teach certain things. They have their own requirements of core courses, electives, and many times they have motivation to offer electives that are accessible to other departments, and so on. So those kind of decisions are best left to the department level instead of always going up to the college level or the university level, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, using design principles in practice. The design principles were originally proposed as hypotheses based on analysis of several case studies. Social science in general is a case study. The problem statement itself can be discursive and descriptive. The solutions themselves, surveys or whatever other methodologies are involved, can be descriptive and discursive. So sustaining commons, the design principles, also can be built on case studies that then have to be codified into things that are monitored for progress and evaluated with quantitative metrics, as we have been looking at here. In the more than 20 years since they were developed, they have held up to scrutiny. Although some people may interpret the design principles as blueprints for designing robust institutional arrangements, they are not. So that's very important to remember. These are design principles and they are not blueprints. So each situation, each sector, action arena, resource being considered may require specific blueprints that are built on the design principles, but that blueprint doesn't immediately apply in another location, even for the same sector. Fisheries in one location may not necessarily apply in terms of its whole blueprint in another place. Okay, they are observed regularities derived by looking at cases after the fact. So it's learning by doing. So how can we use the design principles in practice? One way to use design principles is to translate them into questions concerning how to improve institutional arrangements for governing the commons. For example, for local resource users, we can ask, how can we better define the boundaries of this resource and of the individuals who are using it, as to make clear who is authorized to harvest and where harvesting is authorized. So questions themselves can be split into analytical, normative, strategic, tactical, and so on. So we are mixing them up here. How can we clarify the relationship between the benefits received and the contributions to the costs of sustaining this system? How can we enhance the participation of those involved in making key decisions about this system? Who is monitoring the system, and do they face appropriate incentives given the challenge of monitoring? Are they getting paid too little, as we said before, in terms of security guards for a forest, or monitoring fisheries regulation compliances and so on? And are they appropriately incentivized to do a good job? What are the sanctions we are authorizing, and can they be adjusted so that someone who makes an error or small rule infraction is sufficiently warned so as to ensure longer term compliance without our trying to impose unrealistic sanctions? So once the sanctions are defined, there is a person who imposes the sanctions. The person has to have some level of discretion to decide whether the infraction that happened was minor enough to be ignored, or a small sanction versus what is implied by the rules, by the letter of the law, and so on. So that becomes a bit subjective, as you can imagine. What are the sanctions we are authorizing? We said that. What local and regional mechanisms exist to resolve conflicts arising over the use of this resource? So can individuals or clubs decide things on their own? They have their own conflict resolution mechanism, or does it have to always go up to a higher formal government level in some ways? For design principles 7 and 8, questions need to be addressed at a higher level of governance. Are there functional and creative efforts by local appropriators to craft effective stewardship mechanism for local resources that should be recognized? How do we create a multiple layer polycentric system that can be dynamic, adaptive, and effective over time? So we're talking about resources in a larger context, like the university with many departments, sports, health system, and dorm system, food systems, transportation, and so on. These are not, of course, the only questions local resource users and officials should ask in an effective process of crafting institutional arrangements, but they can be thought of as a good beginning, so that you make the system adaptive, you learn by doing, and you have agency of the participants to change the regulations, make it better, and ensure sustainable harvesting of the resources that is being considered for governance. Okay, we're getting close. Maybe we'll do it as a separate podcast. This one may be a little bit short, 11.5 minutes, but that's okay. So I should be able to wrap it up, I think, in the next podcast. Okay.